purpose of this. So I'll talk about the journey of the Agastya Foundation. And hopefully you can read between the lines what the learnings, if any, that may be of value to you and certainly have been of value to me. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
So yeah, I was a banker for many years, and like my father, who was a very successful business executive, I wanted to become the CEO of Citibank or some bank anywhere in the world. That was my dream, and that's really what I wanted to do. So I was, in the corporate hierarchy sort of game. And certainly I don't have an entrepreneurial background. I am what when I came back to India, is referred to, which I never knew, as a TAM brand. So we pay a lot of attention to skills and mathematics and learning and all that kind of thing. And we haven't been particularly great in entrepreneurship, certainly not in a commercial sense. Maybe entrepreneurship with the mind, but not so much in terms of translating that into a huge number of jobs and businesses and all the rest of it. So, in that sense, I'm not an entrepreneur, wasn't my background. But when I was a kid in Rishi Valley, a boarding school in Andhra Pradesh, I used to dream of building a school. I read a book called Lost Horizon. It's about a mythical Himalayan kingdom called Shangri-La. So I used to dream about living in Shangri-La. And, apple orchards, gurgling streams, and cool air, and all the rest of it. And actually, Rishi Valley is a bit like Shangri-La. It's quite a unique place. So I used to think, it'd be nice when you grow up to actually live in a place like that. And as I grew older, I thought, and I say older, when I moved into my teens, I thought, it'd be nice to actually build a school and run a school, right? And the idea was creativity. I remember reading a book by Hermann Hesse called The Glass Bead Game, and it's about all these super intelligent people, kids, who do fascinating things, leveraging the power of their mind. And I used to think it'd be great to have that school, all these really smart kids, they would change the world, and it'd be located in the foothills of the Himalayas. So that was my dream. And of course, I joined, London Business School wasn't the right place for that kind of dream, right? But anyway, I joined LBS and I met a guy from IIT Madras. He was a year my senior, called Swami. And for some reason, we got into a lot of discussion about Che Guevara and the position of poor people and the importance of revolution and so on. Again, not discussed in the classrooms at LBS, but this was the conversation I was having. And after I finished my degree, I wanted to go and work in Cuba. So I went to the Cuban embassy in London and said, I'd like a job in Cuba. And she said, what kind of job? I said, maybe in a field, cornfield or something, I'll do something. And she looked at me like I was a nut. This was 78, the height of the Cold War. So anyway, I kind of walked out with my tail between my legs, came back to India. Swami was working in a village in Bihar. So I told my father, who was then chairman of Engineers India, he'd quit his private sector job and moved to Delhi. And he said, so what do you plan to do? I said, I'm going to go and work with Swami in a village in Bihar. And my father was a very open-minded person, and he said, that's what you want to do, by all means do it. And so I was getting ready for it, but my family was kind of very nervous. What's this, 78, going and working in a village in Bihar? And as luck would have it, one night there was a knock on the door. And I opened the door and it was Swami, chain smoking. So I said, hey Swami, what are you doing here? And he came in and I said, what's the problem, man? I was going to join you in Bihar. He said, I had to flee the village. So I said, why? He said, look, I was doing a project to disintermediate the middlemen in that village who were exploiting the hell out of the poor people. And yesterday there was a knock on my door. And I opened the door and there was a disheveled woman, or, sari and all that, hair disheveled, and she said, she started screaming. And she accused me of raping her, or trying to rape her actually. So he was like absolutely stunned, and then all the villagers gathered around and they said, "We better string this guy up," literally. So the cops came to me and said, "Look, you better leave this village, or they literally will hang you." So he put me in a bus and packed me off. So that was the end of Swami's experimentation with social work. And he said, "Hey, I realized I need my scotch, and I like playing billiards. I'm getting the hell out of this country." He ended up in Nigeria somewhere. So anyway, I panicked. I felt awful, but my family was, needless to say, in unadulterated joy. But I didn't give up, because I read about a guy called Bunker Roy, who's become an iconic figure. And he was doing this work, Barefoot College in Pilonia in Rajasthan. So I said, "I'll go and see Bunker Roy." So I went and saw Bunker Roy, and I remember the evening in '79 or something in Rajasthan. I said, "I'd like to come and work with you." Very smart guy, going to do school and all that. And he said, "My wife is a Tamilian, so that's a bonus. She's an IAS officer, I think." And I said, "Where am I going to sleep?" He said, "Here." And there was a cot out, literally, no ceiling, nothing. And, you know, that's the way it'll be. But it was a bit too much for me, so I came back to Delhi and basically chickened out. I didn't have the guts. I remember my father telling me, "Look, you're going to Rajasthan, you want to do this, you're not used to roughing it out. So this one last time, I'm going to buy you a train ticket first class. After that, my dear, you're on your own. Okay, you want to do it, do it. I'm your dad, but I'm not going to underwrite your experiments." I said, "Okay." But anyway, I came back, I didn't have the guts, and started my commercial career. One thing led to another, Puerto Rico, New York, and so on and so forth. But, you know, Rishi Valley is a bit of an unsettling place, okay? If you're open-minded. My father was first batch of Rishi Valley. And we grew up in the shadow of a very outstanding, great philosopher called Jiddu Krishnamurti. And Krishnamurti, if anything, was somebody who never let you be at ease. He shook your world up if you wanted your world to be shaken. Because his whole philosophy was based on questioning everything, threadbare, and not taking anything for granted, right? And that could delve right into the depths of your consciousness. So that was my background. I'm not saying I was doing that, but that was certainly my sort of unconscious mind. I remember in '79 he was passing through Delhi on the way to Varanasi. And the principal of Rishi Valley called my father and said, "You want to meet him?" So my father said, "Come along, let's go and say hello to JK. So we went to the airport. And he was chatting with my dad, and then he came up to me and he said, "Hello, how are you?" And I was overawed, and I was sick of my job. I was working for a consulting firm. You know, I did the entire capital expenditure estimates for what is called Noida today. So I did the estimates for the government of UP on behalf of this company. And I hated the job, working till 3, 4 in the morning using calculators and stuff. And so I see Krishnamurti, and he says, "So how are you?" And I said, "It's back to the grind for me." And I was saying it from the bottom of my heart. So he just smiled, looked at me and said, "Don't get your nose too close to it." And he turned around and walked away, and I remember thinking, "Now there goes a free human being. How come I'm not like that? And I have to go back to this job and, you know, pound away on my calculator." So all this had an impact on me as the years went ahead, and I was thinking, you know, I'm getting older and older, how about this dream project? And eventually there were a couple of events. We may not have time to talk about that. I kind of took the step to go ahead and do it. You know, I used to take the train to work in London. I remember thinking, my generation, we used to listen to a lot of Pink Floyd. Probably heard it. There's a song from The Dark Side of the Moon. "Hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way." And I remember thinking in the train, holding on to this, looking at all these English people, very serious, and saying, I think they're hanging on in desperation. And I've become like that. I'm hanging on in desperation. So all this added up, and I said, to hell with it. I'm going to try and make this dream project happen. And 98 was when India exploded those bombs, right? So my father said, look, you don't know much about education, science, banker. Neither did he. Why don't we go and consult P.K. Iyengar, who had retired as the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission. So I went to see Iyengar. And Iyengar described to me how India built the bomb. And he said, look, Ramji, at every stage we were scraping the barrel. The system doesn't produce people who think out of the box. Okay? They just come and they want you to tell them what to do, but you don't build a bomb then. At least not in those days. So we had to unmold them. And this was a challenge that Bhabha faced and everyone faced. And yeah, we succeeded, but against great odds. So this idea you have of school and fostering creativity is right on the money. In fact, the biggest failure we've had in this country, he said, at least that's the way the scientific establishment felt, is Nehru's so-called scientific temper, creative temper, never disseminated to the masses of India. So Iyengar referred to it as cause-effect thinking. He said cause-effect thinking is fundamental. Understanding the consequences of your actions is something that doesn't exist for the most part in India. And he said the West recognized the importance of this and began to instill it in their education system a century ago. Now we still haven't done it. So if your idea of building the school, you can incorporate some of this and find ways and means of transmitting that to the mass of India, then I think we'll have transformative impact. And he said, I'm happy to advise you and join you. So my father, P.K. Iyengar, former principal of Rishi Valley, I got a group together, some students, some people from industry, and I said, look, Iyengar is talking about cause-effect thinking and creativity and all that. Let's question that. And there were views from an English teacher, slightly different views. A college student, I remember, said, I went through school, I can't remember a single thing I learned at school. The only thing I remember is a project where I made an African village, right? So all of this, as a banker, to me was extremely new. Imagine talking about cause-effect thinking and creativity. In banking, it's very rapid. You're making money from money kind of thing. So I was enjoying this. I quit my job. There was no money, but fortunately, it was intellectually so stimulating that I was able to deal with a lot of the imponderables through the sheer romance and excitement of building this new thing, right? And we came up with a model. We said, look, creative people, innovative people, outstanding problem solvers, they see a lot more than the average person does. They feel things more deeply than the average person does. Why is that? You know, you see a lot of breakthroughs in business, science, the arts. The person has seen something simple, seen something completely different, and then it's led to a breakthrough. So they're great observers. Maybe because they have less bias and prejudice. There's a whole literature on it. They're great observers. The second thing is there's a process of awareness in the brain. When they don't leap to a conclusion, they allow the observation to play out in their brains. There's discovery, there's experimentation, and then finally there's association, connecting apparently unconnected pieces of information. The dots, as it were. And then they have this capacity to apply all that to produce something of value to society. So we said, okay, observation, awareness, experimentation, discovery, association, and application. All of this is based on the foundation of curiosity. If you're not curious, if you don't have the desire to find out, to question, the urge, you won't be that observant. Right? You've got to have the hunger. So we said curiosity is the foundational skill. We called it a skill because I asked Iyengar, do you think it's possible to learn to be more observant and aware of this and that? And he said, yeah. I will give you, Ramji, a non-scientist, 100 counterintuitive science experiments. And I guarantee you, after that, you will start viewing the world differently. You'll observe more deeply, you'll ask more questions. Now, can you create a Ramanujan or an Einstein or a Newton? Maybe not. But you can certainly raise the level of curiosity and creativity. If people are at 0.25 and we bring them through these interactions to 2 or 3, that's a 10-fold increase. Imagine. And we began to run these teacher workshops with the help of the Homi Bhabha Center for Science Education, a local creativity trainer, Hari Parmeshwaran in Bangalore. They were fascinating. About a year went by, went back to see Naidu. It was my 4th or 5th meeting. And I said, you know, it's either on or off. Is the land deal on? And he looked at his secretary and said, what's the feedback on the teacher training? I kept my fingers crossed under the table, and the secretary said, never seen anything like this, sir. Phenomenal. They were phenomenal. All kinds of unusual things, you know, spatial skills and all that. So we got the land, we bought it, and that was the good news. The bad news is we quickly ran out of money. At least I wasn't prepared to invest any more of my own money, right? Because this is a commercial venture. So what do? We did what we're good at. We huddled and came up with the idea of taking a mobile lab to the villages while we wait for the money to build the buildings on the campus. So we launched the first mobile lab in 2002. The newspapers found it very innovative and different. So they did an article, Kuppam's Newton becomes villagers' driving force, about a guy called Balram, our first tractor driver whom we trained to be the first mobile science instructor. And then the government of Karnataka read about it and called me and said, why don't we expand this? And so we gradually began to increase the number of mobile labs. Then I ran into Rakesh Jhunjhunwala in Bombay, and he got very taken in by our project, and some money began to come into the campus. Another friend in London, Alok Oberoi. And to cut a long story short, today we have actually now 170 mobile science vans. We have 60 labs on motorcycles. Harsh was referring to it, very kind and delighted we got the award for it a month ago. And we have about 60 science centers. One is just outside the gate here, funded by Edelweiss, where we have a lot of very low-cost, counterintuitive science experiments. So Madak was, referring to our mantra, curiosity, creativity. The third thing we developed over time was confidence. You must have the self-belief, the confidence. So even if you're curious, it's not going to move forward if you don't have that motivation, right? And the belief that, yeah, it's worth doing, or I can do it. That's very important. So we said the behavioral thing about the self-belief is key. One of the things we ran into, again accidentally, we had a science fair in a village about 12 years ago. And the model was we would train teachers to teach these science experiments to visiting kids. And we were told to expect some 5,000 kids that day in the village. So we didn't know what to do. There weren't enough teachers to teach. Another crisis. This time some kids came to us and said, look, you don't have teachers. How about if you taught us to teach them? Never thought of it. So no option. 5,000 kids were going to show up, right? So the kids said, we can bring like 100 friends. So we had one day and we trained the hell out of these 100 kids. And the science fair was open. The visiting children loved it. Because they didn't see gray-haired guys like me with very stern expressions waiting to teach them. They saw other kids smiling, excited, nervous. So it was a kind of counterintuitive experience for everyone. And it turned out to be a superb success, at least behaviorally speaking. And we said, hey, we stumbled into another opportunity. And we called it the Young Instructor Leader Program. And what we realized there was these children teaching children. The real thing was the confidence that these young teachers began to get, the self-belief. And they're the ones who've been winning the Intel Iris Science Award. Poor children. very poor children, farmers and so on, at the national level for 7-8 years in a row from Augusta. So one day, at the end of all this, I was watching a class under a tree, and I'd taken a professor from the Indian Institute of Science in the early days of Augusta. Tell me, do you think our mobile lab guy is doing a good job? I'm not a science guy, so I brought a science person too. So we were watching this class. It was fascinating. It said the heart of how to learn and actually how to live. This is the tractor driver who became a teacher, Bachelor of Arts teacher. So he looks at the kids and he says, do you believe what you see? I'm sure the cameraman believes what he sees. So I believe what I see. So the kids said, yeah, we believe what we see. So what do you see? I see a tree and I see some grass and a building there. What do you see? So he takes a piece of paper and rolls it up like this, right? And they all do that. And says, close one eye and look through it, through your left eye, for example. So you look through your left eye, and then he says, open the right eye, look through both eyes, put your hand here, and tell me what you see. And there were ripples and giggles of laughter because I could see you through my hand, right? So he says, but is there a hole in your hand? And the kids, no, obviously not. But you just saw somebody or some object through your hand, through the hole. So you said you believe what you see. So these kids were absolutely flummoxed. So they got into a discussion, yeah, how did this happen? Right? And they were having a lot of fun doing it. Now afterwards I studied it, and it's called the hole in the hand experiment, and some overlay of images in the retina and so on, which I can't explain. But the beauty of this is it brought out the essence of what we need to do. The first thing is, you see something different. Put your hand against the paper. There you go, see? Her curiosity is aroused. Look at me. So that's the thing. You see something unexpected, surprised, different. And what do? You go, hey! Oh wow! Great! And that's what we call the ah. You go ah. Now the ah is very important because it awakens your curiosity. It stirs your mind. Right? It's a bit like you're curious. Now, especially, even for all of us, at any age, the ah is critical. Otherwise, you're a vegetable. And for a lot of kids and people who are tuned out of learning, tuned out of anything, there's no point saying this is important and that is important and you can make a lot of money. You need to do something that gets them awake. Very important. So the first and most important thing is the ah. Now, once you experience the ah, it doesn't have to stop there. Like these kids began to talk because the momentum had started. How did that happen? How is that possible? You keep doing it. Now you're beginning to question. And somebody might have an answer, or you talk to your parent or your friend. Today you look into the internet, and if you do find out, because you might find out in a second, it might take a week, a month, it might take decades or even a lifetime. If you do find out, you experience the famous aha, right? Like Archimedes, various other people. In business, doesn't have to be Archimedes. You find a gap in the market and you go, ah, I found that gap, right? And this is how I do it. And if you do it, you experience the aha. So, ah and aha are really fundamental to learn. The third is you must have fun doing what you're doing, which is the ha-ha, right? So, aha and ha-ha is what I saw that day, perhaps in 2002, next to the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore under a tree. And this humble BA tractor driver had brought that out brilliantly. So a lot of insights came up. One is this, the other is you don't need some highfalutin degrees to produce them in a classroom. Those counterintuitive experiences. The third thing is, these things can be far more memorable than years and years and years of lectures. Right? So, if we are saying that we must reach millions of children, obviously there's a trade-off. You can't spend hours and days and months with each child. You can't have a school for 1 million kids, at least not in the traditional sense. So we have to have punctuated interactions with these children and teachers that produce that in different degrees at different points in time. So that takes them to the next level. Manak was telling me about his grandfather in Thailand, who's head of the Indian National Army, right? And he said his grandfather was playing golf and he won a tournament, alright? And the Thai said, yeah, you may have won this tournament, but your people are slaves. Now that was his grandfather's aha moment, because it changed him. Am I right? Because there was a connection and especially an emotional hit. That, hey, what's my purpose in life? I'm not going to take this. So it has, if you find the right chord, the right way of communicating, you can bring about transformation. You don't have to interact with someone for years and years and years. So we said, you don't have to do that. It's how you interact with the children and others. And hands-on, counterintuitive things, ideally with some emotion put into play, will make that difference. So that's really Agastya's, if you like, mission. We have a vision, I still do. You know, it sounds grandiose. I remember reading, and I'm still reading about the golden age of India. And what is it that created that golden age? And one of the three things was curiosity. The leaders encouraged curiosity. Okay? So my dream is Agastya plays a humble role in triggering curiosity to literally help create an India of curious people, which will lead to creativity through confidence. If that happens, then I think you have a transformed country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramji. As usual, you are outstanding. You can see from the response you got from the group. But listening to you, there are a few things which triggered some thoughts in my mind. And one of them you mentioned just now was the purpose in life. And I think I was reminded of somebody asking, I think we want to point every person has to have a purpose in life. And at some stage you realize what is your purpose in life. So, what are the two most important days in your life, if I ask you? You know about the
I already seen your video clip. Oh, and when I realized really about my life, that one when you born and when...
1 minute, let me handle it, okay. So I think the most important day is the day you were born. But what is the second most important day? I think mostly people say the day I graduated, or the day I got my first job, or the day I got married, or the day I became my father. Yes, these are important. But more importantly, the day you were realized why you were born. So I think there is a search every person has to undertake with himself. I think Ramji did that exceedingly well when he left the Citibank career, financial circle, and did something completely for the society. And he's devoting full time to this. And the kind of impact he's had, a catalytic impact in terms of stirring people's imaginations, curiosity, thinking differently, it's not measurable. He's doing it from very deep belief that if I do it, it will impact lives. And I don't think there's any way to measure that this is how I've done and this is the result of that. So I think, again, coming back to ASCENT, I'm saying, okay, we're trying to help entrepreneurs, but there is no, some people have told me, okay, why don't you measure what the increase in sales? But no, I think as long as there is a stirred thinking happening within all of you, we would have done our job in terms of stirring that thinking, arousing curiosity, and then, because of that, impacting many, many lives. And the other thing you mentioned was, I think we only look at the result and not the root cause. think every time every entrepreneur asks me, I don't have time, and my answer is always with that effect. It's not about. You need to dig deeper why you don't have time. Is it to do with your team? Is it to do with your delegation style? Is it to do with what you're doing? Are you trying to do too many things? Should you be focused? And then again, go much deeper. Why are you not delegating? You don't trust people. Is there a fear that they will take away some secrets? So you have to drill really deep, and then you get all the answers. And I, for one, don't believe that a single person should have a problem of time. You may have certain temporary phases when you are complete project, that time you stretch. But on a continuous basis, somebody says that I don't have time, then there is something fundamentally wrong. And you have to look much deeper in terms of realizing why you don't have time. And you have to resolve ultimately why you don't have time. Because if you are doing everything, then my philosophy is every few years, how do you make yourself redundant? You do something, recruit a team, delegate something, and then you withdraw. I'm not saying abdicate, but select good team members and then withdraw from that, do something else, And that provides your experiences to each person. And it actually rejuvenates you and your life. I think we will now throw, if you have any questions, Ramji.
What were your experiences when you scaled up, probably from that Andhra? No, from that Andhra village, then you got into Karnataka, from
the experience of scaling up. So, the initial 5 years were very slow. Long gestation, I would say 6 years. And I was getting very frustrated. On reflection, it was a very good thing because it taught me patience, 1. 2, I spent a lot of time talking to people, very smart people, picking their brains. I would go call somebody like Harsh and say, hey, I'd like to come and see you, do you have half an hour to spare? Say, yeah, okay. And I'd go with a notepad and sit down and ask questions, keep writing. So I met some fascinating people, and gradually what happened was these meetings led to a sort of design. Scale was designed into Agastya in the early years. Because the people I was talking to were people who were confronting, they may have been retired, but they were feeling, how do we change this country kind of thing. So I got more and more into that way of thinking. So scale was designed into, right? So the old idea of building a school became one of raising the level of the ocean, even by a millimeter. So that was one. Maybe an unusual kind of experience. The second is, so we were just waiting for money to go big. Now because we had bought this big piece of land, where I had all these dreams, you can't buy a big piece of land and then build a little hut. The government of Andhra would have put me in jail. So you perforce began to think. So I was thinking of creating the Exploratorium in San Francisco on the campus, but for Indian needs, and a big ecological restoration project. So all these big ideas began to flow because of some things that we did. So as you scale, the thing is, the people, it was very slow, word of mouth. We're not hiring Harvard MBAs. We're hiring, people from pretty humble colleges, from villages, unknown colleges, who haven't been trained very well, that we have to inspire. So initially it was word of mouth, then biting more than we could chew. So the government of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka said, can you do this across the state? And I said, yes. And then my guy said, how do we do it? Fortunately, I had some money by then to buy the vehicles. The government said, we'll underwrite the cost. And I took a guy who was earning 3,000 rupees a month. He's one of our senior managers today, and said, look, I don't care how you do it, just do it. Now, the guy went, he actually physically swept the floor, and less than that, began to hire people. It was very stressful for him, but gradually we built a team. So We promised more than we could have done at that time, but somehow we were able to fill the void. People came in, and we had a lot of well-wishers and high credibility because of the kind of people I was consulting. Right? Somebody would say, oh, PK Iyengar is involved in this, must be something, even though it was just a share. So over time it just, then people began to contact us, it began to snowball slowly. So we introduced a very decentralized management. We had to. So that allowed people to run their operations. If it was very centralized, it would have limited the scale. So the thinking was scaled, and the implementation facilitated that. I'm not saying that it was all hunky-dory and perfect, because there were lots of issues, heart-stopping moments even today, that how do you manage quality in some village, somewhere, how do you supervise, all those things. But thinking, with a vision, see, most organizations, Citibank and many others I worked with, they have all these visions and missions and so on. You can never relate to them. So I think if you want to scale, you make sure that your mission and vision is something that people can relate to here. The other day at MIT, a professor said, Ramji, the biggest challenge for organizations around the world is what he called the exponential decay of vision. How do you avoid the vision decay? And I gave him two things, but I won't go into it. One of them was, I gave him the example of And I said, if my teacher understands then I'm reasonably comfortable that he or she is going to be implementing that at the grassroots. So I can feel confidently hire another 300, because the communication of the message becomes that much easier. So how can you come up with something very simple that hits you both here and here as a mission? I think that's the success of a lot of religious organizations. The message is very simple and clear, and it hits you here in addition to you. So you need to come up with that. I think that will allow a lot of scale. Now this may not be necessarily what you read about in the textbooks, but this has been my experience. Even today, I've now made the in English, and then I realized you need it in the local language. So we had it dubbed in Gujarati, Marathi, and Hindi, and this. Then somebody said that dubbing doesn't sound authentic, so now we've got to play around a little bit, because I don't speak all those languages, to make it a little bit more authentic. But that's important. Otherwise, you're just talking highfalutin stuff, and then in the classroom in a village in Maharashtra, something else has happened. Then there's no way you're going to scale what you wanted to scale. Yes, sir.
Entrepreneurship is tough, as we all know. Social entrepreneurship is probably many times tougher. So if I have to ask you, if any of us wanted to be a social entrepreneur like what you've done, what would be the first few things we should keep in mind and have on our side? Because you have the giant, you had guys who work with you, help to get money, etc. Not everybody has that before, but is that imperative? So just a few thoughts.
Firstly, have you read the book, The Innovator's DNA?
Yes.
You have. So the points he brings out there are no different from what I said we stumbled into 15 years ago. Questioning, observation, experimenting, associating, and networking. We hadn't talked about networking. So that is common to both. Social entrepreneurship has a high level of complexity in a people sense, much more so than commercial entrepreneurship, because it's very non-homogeneous. I have to deal with a poor village kid, their parent, then a government official, a headmaster, then an industrialist, and an investment banker, and a politician, and a bureaucrat. So it's a high degree of complexity. So if you want to do it, you must enjoy that kind of people complexity. If you don't enjoy people complexity, you've got to actually love it, or you'll end up hating it, right? Now, is it imperative to network like the way I did? Not at all. I just happened to do it. But people ask me, you had access to these people. I'll tell you something. If somebody wrote me, called me and said, young person, hey, I'd like to come and talk to you for an hour or half an hour. Not many people do that. I would say, yeah, sure, come on over. Let me share. So most of the people, the so-called, big shots are eminent people, most of them would be happy to see you. Most of them. Some would reject, but it's like in sales. So you just go and say, I want to come and talk to you, I read a little bit, I need some insights. I did that with MS Swaminathan. Right? And then, once you're there, if you can demonstrate your listening, that person takes to you and then it leads to something else. So I don't think it's a big deal.
Okay, we have time for one last question. So,
I have 5-year-old twins and inculcating of curiosity. How can one get view of, does Agastya Foundation offer any kind of guides, tools, experiments, how to inculcate curiosity in?
So what you do is, we have a science center just outside the gate here, funded by Edelweiss. If you have time, stop by. You'll see a lot of very interesting science experiments, right? You just take your kids and put them there. We're creating a new thing called the Mazza box for younger children. So one way of inculcating is, instead of telling somebody be curious, just expose them to things and allow them to discover. The famous Einstein story. His father gave him a magnetic compass when he was 5 years old, a little bed. And in his 70s he says, it was that compass that made me think, is there an invisible force in the universe? Look at the power of that gift. Perhaps the greatest gift, at least in science, of several centuries. One magnetic compass. So expose your kids to that, expose them to nature, because that has a humanizing effect, and at the same time